Hello, Gaz Williams here for Sonic Lab, and you heard me playing guitar through the new Maschine MK3. So, this is it. This is the software-hardware combination. I recommend that before we go any further, if you don't know what this is or you want to know about the new features, then Nick and Boris filmed a comprehensive look at it a couple of weeks ago on Sonicstate. Watch that first, then you'll know exactly what is new and what is kind of the latest, greatest features of it. What I want to do though is jump straight in to the review. So let's get going. Right, well, here it is. It's the same size as the previous ones, but they've managed to sort of move things around and make things bigger. Obviously, the screens are there. They're new on this form factor. The screens made their debut on the Maschine Studio that came out in 2013. And it's great to see them on here. It's got this kind of rather slicker look than the previous versions, and it has, I have to say, this very sharp edges. Now that sharp edge though, on here, they can be quite sharp to, if you happen to kind of hit yourself while playing on them. So if you were like ow! I tell you, that hurts. Also, on the physical front, it's got this completely sort of flush, flat finish. On earlier ones, they had like recessed sides that allowed you to be able to fit sort of stands or kind of wood end cheeks. There doesn't appear to be any way to attach anything. There was a stand that Native Instruments made. It's not going to work on here. There's no mounting holes on the bottom there, so not sure what's going to happen there. I'm sure someone will figure something out though. So yes, it's got these, as I mentioned, big screens. It's got also much bigger pads than were previously on them. And I have to say that the pads, they really are very, very nice indeed. I would say that they set the new standard for me in terms of playability. They feel really good. They're very sensitive. You can really get a really nice sense of dynamics on there. And also, here I've mapped a snare across them all. I realised you can even do this. I'm sure Native Instruments wouldn't recommend it though. But it's another way of entering beats with sticks, like they used to do in the olden days. So with the new layout of the buttons, it's a lot more inspirational to use, and things feel, you can get at things a lot quicker without having to go through embedded menus. And these buttons along the top are a good example. So I've got Abbey Road 60s kit loaded in here, and if I go into, say, the keyboard mode, then there they are. But if I engage the arpeggiator, for instance, that's pretty cool. But if I go into the chords and choose some of these chord sets, you get some really interesting drum patterns just by playing arpeggios through drum beats. Let's get some of this touch strip on here as well. So like lots of good fun to be had. Anyway, so that's the basic thing. The other new thing here physically is this touch strip here, and we'll have a little look at that in a little bit. And also this knob here, which allows us to navigate things that we can see on the screen. For instance, on the browser, I can flick through different products here, and I can pan across. I can go down through. I can choose things. I can press it as well, and it loads stuff in. And that's actually very, very cool. It feels a bit loose. I'm not sure how robust it's going to be, but it's certainly precise and accurate to use. So I think it is a very cool new addition to the Maschine line. So mentioning the form factor, the Maschine MK1, which we have here, this is my trusty old one here, that's been around since 2009. And actually, kudos to Native Instruments because it is still fully compatible with the software. 2.6.9 is the software we're on now, and all the new features that are in here are still accessible on the old model. Obviously, it doesn't have the touch strip and it doesn't have the screens, but in terms of the compatibility, they still have managed to make it fully compatible. So, big thumbs up to Native Instruments there. Perhaps they learnt their lesson with the kind of ill-fated core controllers. Less about them. Anyway, so, yes, as I mentioned, same form factor as the Maschine Mark1, Mark2, and also same price as well, which is very cool when you consider that now it does actually have the audio interface built in. And this audio interface is pretty cool, actually. I think it's necessary, I would say, because it's balanced out there. So, you know, you can run a pair of them out into XLRs, and certainly useful in the professional live sphere there. There's a stereo in, and there's also a microphone in on a 1/4-inch jack. No phantom power, bit of a shame, so you can only really sort of run dynamic mics with it, but I can understand that as well a little bit. I don't think they've probably got quite enough space there to fit an XLR socket in, and also I suppose, you know, in the field, live, dynamic mics are probably a bit more useful than feedback-prone condensers. But what you did notice in that opening thing, I was playing the guitar and I had the guitar plugged into here, so there's no sort of dedicated high impedance input, but it seems pretty decent plugged into that microphone input there with just a regular guitar lead. So that's pretty cool. And I was only using a teeny bit of gain on there too. Speaking of gain, the headphone amp that's built in there seems pretty good. I've tried it out with a few different pairs of headphones. It seems to deliver quite a nice punchy sound. I was quite impressed with it. And there was more gain than my little ears could take, really, so that was quite cool. And I like that that it's got these physical knobs for controlling actual hardware outputs and stuff. I think that's a nice little that's a nice design feature there. So of course the big screens do make sampling a lot of fun because, you know, going to the sample mode, the two displays show, like the left one shows the entirety of the sample, whereas the one on the right here lets us kind of zoom in, and we can go right in at sample level, you know, and we can move our start points and find exactly, you know, pinpoint accurate, and it's nice and it's fast and it's very, very fluid to use. So it makes editing, wave editing and sampling, cutting and slicing a real joy. So I mentioned earlier this touch strip bit. Now this is kind of pretty funky, actually. You can do some neat little things with it. So I go shift and perform effects. Now this like turns it on, and this is kind of like a group level effect. This is kind of inherited from the Maschine Jam. Now the Maschine Jam came out probably about 18 months ago, and that's a more sort of Ableton Live push kind of focused device where you can sort of easily see all your patterns. You can do everything that the Jam can do on this model, but it's not as intuitive and you don't quite have the same layout that you can do on that. However, this little feature, these touch strips, this is pretty cool really. So here I've got this map to a filter. And there's a selection of effects that you've got for it. I like this reso echo actually. And this has got a very nice finish, and I think it's a nice little touch. You can see this little blue LED there because that's relating to this touch strip being assigned to group E, which is blue. But I mean, if I assigned it onto this one here, then we can see it's yellow, or it follows the color scheme. So nice little design touch there. So in that opening, I was playing a guitar using the lock feature. Now, this lock feature isn't specific to the Mark III. As I say, you can actually access the lock features on the old Mark I there too. But what the lock features do is any settings, so whatever the settings are, we can kind of lock it down and then change all the parameters and then set that to another lock. If I go into my little lock window here, I've got a bunch of different sort of sounds, and that's how I was able to sort of morph. I had it over 4 bars there, so they were moving over 4 bars, warping all the parameters from one locked setting to another setting. And that is a pretty unique thing that Maschine has got, and I think it's actually very creative. Speaking of which, the Maschine is seen as a beat maker, and first and foremost, yes, that is kind of what it is. But I was using it in the opening there as a guitar effects controller, and there's no reason why you shouldn't use it in that way. And I think this is one of the things that's actually very, very cool about it. It's very flexible, and you can set up all sorts of routings and all kinds of MIDI applications for it. So I think sometimes, that maybe the kind of focus of it as a beat maker maybe kind of obscures the fact that it's actually a very kind of useful and well laid out controller for a whole host of different musical purposes. So for instance, the way I use mine at home is I use mine to act as a MIDI sequencer for sequencing lots of hardware synths, and I think it really kind of, it excels in that way. And it's very simple. I can go to a group, create a group, channel, pan across to MIDI, set my MIDI output, set my channel. It's really fast, and then you can have loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of MIDI sequences going on, and be able to interact with it all in real time. And I think it's a very underrated aspect of the Maschine, really, as a standalone hardware sequencer, standalone with a computer attached, of course. This one, though, physically, it's only got 1 MIDI in and 1 MIDI out, but you know, you can have multiple USB hubs or whatever attached to your computer anyway. So if we've got a little beat programmed in, for instance, these screens are also pretty cool. Hit events, and we get a nice overview of all of the parts. And using the selection tools, we can kind of choose ranges, and we can get in there and move and choose things. We can move them around, we can pitch them and change the lengths of them and the velocities, all from the controller without looking at the computer. So that's pretty cool. However, I would like on this right window to be able to just find the selection and just find a button just that selects everything that you can see in the right hand side. You can't do that as it goes, and that's a bit frustrating because this is a lovely way of dialing in to find exact place. You still have to use these other controls over here to, which feels a little bit not fluid. Now, being able to jump around scenes and it jump around them in a beautiful musical way is a really lovely part of Maschine. But sadly, you can't record those performances. It won't record them. It's not like Ableton Live where it will record that across to the arrangement view. At this point in time, you can't. So it seems a real shame that this really nice, enjoyable part isn't currently... So there is an arranger, but the arranger involves putting things in sort of manually. It doesn't record into the arrangement. It is coming, though. It is coming. It's on the roadmap. There is going to be a song mode. I don't know when it's coming, but it's coming. So you see, actually now is a good time to kind of come into the Maschine platform, really, because the software package that comes with it is really decent now. I mean, it comes with Massive, it comes with Monarch, it comes with Prism, it comes with the Gentleman, a lovely upright piano, it comes with Drum Lab, it comes with Retro Machines Mark II, a whole bunch of other things, West African instruments. It's a very, very decent premium package of software that it comes with. So that's pretty cool. Something else that's new with it, and again, for everybody who's got a Maschine, if I go now and I'd call up this little bass synth that come out with the latest version, it's actually brilliant. It's a really cool little bass synth. So I'll put a little ARP on here. So there's a cool little bass synth that comes now. These sort of built for Maschine specifically. There's just a small array of parameters, and it's super. It's really cool. I really like that. I think that's a nice little addition. So Maschine comes with a bunch of effects as well, and these effects, everything's mapped out onto these controls, and it's very, very nice to use. So I really recommend it, because a lot of times people will use it as a host for hosting their favourite VST plugins, but the actual built-in ones are really high quality and superb. But there still is a few issues with the software. This as a hardware unit and as an evolution is brilliant, I have to say. Everything's great. The software, though, still lacks some crucial features, but I do believe these are coming, whether they come in a future 2.0 release or whether they'll hold them back for Maschine MK3 software, whenever that may be. For instance, you know, there's no main timeline if we want to sort of leap around and automate mutes and or even add audio tracks. Yes, sure, we can add audio tracks with the sampling button, but it's a bit of a kludge if you want to just, you know, you can't really just add an audio track. You know, if you just want to put a vocal, you know, in its current guise, you'd still be expected to use it possibly as a plug-in inside a DAW and use that for your audio tracks. But it is coming, and at some point it will be part of the Maschine software, and I think then, like, the addition of the audio interface will really take on an extra sort of, you know, extra value then when it's got the facility to do that. So in terms of competition, straight away you're probably thinking about the Ableton Live Push 2, Ableton Push 2 controller, which is obviously the dedicated Ableton controller. You know, they've got similarities, but they're both kind of quite separate. And of course, you know, you can always run Maschine inside of Ableton Live, so, you know, you could almost justify having the two. But of course, Akai kind of came storming back with the MPC, releasing two standalone models, the MPC Live and the MPC X, which are both extremely well designed, standalone and computer combo. So they've got that advantage of being able to run them without a computer. And people maybe were wondering, would Native Instruments follow suit? I'm not sure it would make sense for them, as their main kind of thing is based on computer software. But who knows what will happen in the future. And of course, Beatmaker 3 on the iPad, that kind of gives Maschine a good run for the money in terms of functionality. But with all that said and done, something that is really impressive with Maschine is the fact that you don't have to look at the computer at all when you're operating it. These big screens really make it a very fluid way of working. You only need to go to the computer for a few things, for instance, naming files and whatnot, but pretty much you can stay within it. But that's not to underestimate how good the software side of it is as well, though. And if you prefer to work that way, the software is a beautiful environment to work within too. So it's whatever you like. I certainly like having the screen of the computer off and only working within the hardware. And the addition of the audio interface kind of makes you almost feel like you are in a hardware environment even more so. So if you already own a Maschine, is it worth upgrading to this one? I would say if you have got a Mark 1 or a Mark 2, then yes, I think that the big screens and the new layout of buttons, because as the software has kind of developed, some of these buttons and functions have changed too, to sort of represent the kind of newer, you know, having like the follow button for the sequencer, having the pad modes, chord modes, step modes up here, they all make for a more fluid workflow. So yes, I think if you're a Mark 1 or a Mark 2 user or a micro user, then it does make sense to maybe go for this one. However, if you're a Maschine studio owner, which has got obviously the big screens and it's got lots of extra buttons, then I'm not so sure. I think maybe the difference then is kind of not so great. But as I mentioned though, if you are interested in Maschine, then now's the best time than ever before to kind of come into the platform, because it's the same price, £479 UK, than the previous generation. So, you know, the colour screens, the built-in audio interface and all the other bits and bobs that are on here, certainly represent good value for money, plus that incredible software package as well that it comes with. I mean, that software would have retailed for probably more than the cost of this on its own, only just a few years ago. So that pretty much wraps up our review of the Maschine MK3. I do think it is definitely an evolution of the platform, a positive evolution. I love it that there's an audio interface on there. I find that the new pads are very playable, very rewarding. I have a few reservations that kind of is more to do with the software rather than the actual hardware. I think the hardware is great. And as I mentioned earlier, we know that there's some great stuff coming out in the future with the software. And as evidenced by the Mark I controller still being, fully usable now, it feels like that you're going to be looked after by Native Instruments for the foreseeable future. That's it. I'm Gaz Williams. This has been Sonic Lab. Bye for now.